Now, the Boston Tea Party is one of the most iconic events of the American Revolution. It was one that we kind of look to a lot, and I think it's because it kind of has that romantic flair of, you know, the people get all dressed up like Indians and they go and do this really rebellious act by throwing all the tea into the ocean. And because of that, it got a lot of attention and was really one of those big rebellious moments where the colonies were saying, hey, we don't like what you're doing at all. Now, this happened in Boston, hence the Boston Tea Party. Whew. Good, got that one. Now in Boston, there were just really a lot of rebels doing rebellious things, and it was really kind of this hotbed that really helped fuel the American Revolution. Now I always think that the Revolution was guided by strong idealist visionaries that understood politics and understood life, but it was fueled by rebels. The rebels were the people who gave it the energy to move forward. Now, let's just talk a little bit about the particulars about the Boston Tea Party. I think sometimes we misunderstand some of them. When we talked about the Townshend Act is where they passed lots of laws about taxes for certain things, and one of them happened to be tea. So the tea was being taxed. Now, in Boston, they didn't like to pay any taxes at all because they felt that these taxes were just unjust, so they would go out of their way to do things so that they wouldn't have to pay taxes. So in Boston, what was happening was that there was a big underground secret black market for tea. Local people would make their own tea and sell it without paying the tax. This was completely illegal, but they would do it anyway just because they didn't want to buy the British tea that you had to pay taxes on, because they didn't want to give any of their money to that British government that wasn't listening to them. So they were doing this, and actually these black market tea people were making a lot of money selling this black market tea. And the big companies that were working with the British, especially the East India Tea Company, they were losing money a lot. These taxes on their tea meant that a lot less people bought tea, and so they were losing a ton of money. Well, the British government decided that they would help out the tea company to help them make money. So what they actually did was lower the taxes on tea, especially the tea that from their favorite companies. And so now tea was coming into Boston that was cheaper than black market tea. So the people there, the local businessmen that were breaking the law and selling illegal tea, they started to lose money because now the real legitimate legal tea was cheaper. And that did not make them happy. Besides that, if they bought the legal tea, they would still pay some of the taxes, and people didn't like to pay taxes. They didn't want any of that money going to the British government. So now we have a situation where, because the tea was too cheap, the British tea was too cheap, it was putting the illegal tea companies out of business. So that's what the British people were really mad about. When they did the Boston Tea Party, they weren't mad that the tea prices were too high. They were actually mad that the tea prices became too low. And government started fiddling with prices, and they started to put these illegal but local tea companies out of business. So when the East India Company brought this tea in and it sat in a big boat, they decided to throw it overboard. And as a big defiance. Now this was a huge defiance, and the British did not like this at all. They reacted strongly with some of the stuff you'll see coming up on the timeline. But notice that it was these rebels in Massachusetts that really fueled the fire. They had the Boston Massacre. They also had the Boston Tea Party here. Two things where you could see the rebels in Boston were really fueling this revolution and trying to move it forward.